On the night of August 15, 1977, a computer at an observatory in Ohio was doing what it did every night, quietly listening to the sky, printing column after column of numbers onto a long strip of paper. No one was in the room. There was no reason to be. And then, for exactly 72 seconds, something arrived. A signal so strong, so clean, so unlike anything the telescope had ever recorded, that when a scientist finally found it days later, buried in the printout, he could only reach for a red pen. He drew a circle around 6 characters, and beside them he wrote a single word. Wow. Nearly 50 years have passed. We have pointed some of the most powerful instruments ever built at that exact patch of sky, and we have never heard it again. To understand why those 72 seconds still keep astronomers awake, you have to understand what that telescope was built to do. By the 1970s, a quiet idea had crept into mainstream science, that we were probably not alone, and that if another civilization existed out there, the cheapest, fastest way to reach us across the emptiness would not be a spaceship. It would be a radio wave. Radio is patient. It travels at the speed of light. It costs almost nothing to send, and it can cross the galaxy without ever slowing down. So a handful of scientists began to listen. The question was, listen where? The radio spectrum is enormous. Scanning all of it would be like searching for one whispered word across every frequency at once. But there was a clue hidden in physics itself. Hydrogen, the most common element in the universe, naturally hums at a specific frequency, 1420 megahertz, what astronomers call the hydrogen line. Any species anywhere doing science would know this number. It was, in a sense, the one channel the entire universe already had in common, a natural meeting point. Scientists even had a name for the calm stretch of spectrum around it. They called it the water hole, the place, they hoped, where different civilizations might gather to drink. The instrument doing the listening was a radio telescope at Ohio State University. It was so large and so strange-looking, a flat field of metal the size of 3 football fields, that it earned a nickname, the Big Ear. It did not move the way you might imagine a telescope moving. Instead, it stared straight up and let the Earth do the work. As the planet turned, the sky slowly drifted across its view, and any single point in space would take about 72 seconds to pass through the telescope's field of vision. Remember that number, 72 seconds. For years, the Big Ear scanned in near silence, its computer logging the faint static of the cosmos as strings of numbers and letters, where each character stood for how loud the sky was at that instant. A 1 was barely a whisper above nothing. The higher the character climbed, up through the numbers, into the letters, the louder the signal. Most nights the page was a monotonous field of 1s and 2s and blanks, the background hum of a quiet universe. Until it wasn't. Jerry Eman was a volunteer, an astronomer reviewing the Big Ear's printouts by hand, days after they were recorded, hunting through the noise for anything that stood out. And on one of those sheets, dated August 15th, he found a sequence that stopped him cold. 6 characters in a single vertical column, reading 6 E Q U J 5. To almost anyone else, it would have meant nothing. To Eman, it was extraordinary. Those characters described a signal that had risen out of the background, climbed, and fallen away, and at its peak, the letter U, it was more than 30 times louder than the empty static around it. Nothing natural in that survey had ever come close, and the shape of it was even stranger than the strength. The signal had risen and fallen over exactly 72 seconds, the precise time a fixed point in deep space would take to drift across the Big Ear's view. It behaved not like interference from Earth, not like a passing plane or a satellite, but like something out there, standing still against the stars, that the telescope had simply rotated past. Eamon circled the 6 characters in red. In the margin, he wrote one word: "Wow." The name stuck, and the search for an explanation began. Here is what makes the wow signal so difficult to dismiss. It was not just loud, it was loud in all the right ways. It was narrowband, concentrated into a razor-thin slice of the spectrum, the way an intelligent, deliberate transmission would be, and the way natural cosmic noise almost never is. It sat almost exactly at the hydrogen line, the one frequency scientists had predicted a signal might use. It came from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, toward the heart of the galaxy, a region thick with stars. And its rise and fall matched the telescope's sweep so perfectly that a terrestrial source, a person, a machine, a stray reflection here on Earth, struggled to explain it. In other words, if you had sat down in advance and written a checklist of what a genuine message from another civilization should look like, the wow signal would have ticked nearly every box. Which is exactly why what happened next was so maddening. Eamon did the obvious thing. He looked again. The big ear watched that same patch of sky, night after night, waiting for the signal to return. It never did. In the years that followed, astronomers brought heavier and heavier artillery to bear. Powerful arrays of dishes were aimed at Sagittarius. Dedicated searches swept the region across the 1980s and 1990s, and again in the decades after, hunting for even a flicker of the signal's return. And every one of them came back with the same answer: nothing. Whatever spoke on the night of August 15th, 1977, said it's 72 seconds, and then fell completely, permanently silent. This is the cruelty at the center of the mystery. In science, a result you cannot repeat is a result you cannot fully trust. A signal that appears once and never again can never be truly confirmed, and it can never be truly explained. It simply sits there in the record, decades old, refusing to be either proven or dismissed. So what was it? Over the years, the explanations have piled up. The most deflating came in 2017, when a researcher named Antonio Paris proposed that the signal was never from space at all, that 2 comets happened to be drifting through that region of sky in 1977, and that the hydrogen cloud surrounding them had produced the transmission. It was a tidy idea, but most astronomers rejected it, and quickly. Comets are not known to broadcast at that frequency with anything like that strength, and the specifics of the detection simply did not fit. The comet had an alibi. Others have offered gentler, more technical answers, that a faint signal, natural or artificial, was briefly amplified as it passed through the turbulence of interstellar space, flaring up once and never again. And in 2020, an astronomer named Alberto Caballero went hunting for a sender. Combing through star surveys of that exact region, he singled out a distant, sun-like star as a candidate. A place the signal could, in principle, have come from. A lead, not a conclusion. And then there is the explanation no one can rule out, the one that has kept this story alive for half a century, that on one ordinary summer night, a radio telescope in Ohio caught the edge of a deliberate signal, a beacon sweeping the galaxy, or a message never meant for us that happened to wash over the Earth for 72 seconds before moving on. Jerry Eamon himself was always careful. He never declared it a confirmed alien signal, though he admitted it had every hallmark of being exactly that. He said again and again that you cannot draw a grand conclusion from something that happens only once. And he was right. That is the honest answer. But it is not a satisfying one. Because the wow signal remains exactly what it was on the day he circled it. A single, perfect, unrepeatable moment where the universe seemed, for just over a minute, to say something, and then went quiet. So here is the question I will leave you with. After nearly 50 years of silence, do you think we simply misread the noise of a lonely cosmos? Or do you think, for 72 seconds in 1977, we actually heard from someone? Tell me down in the comments, and if mysteries like this are the kind of thing that keeps you up at night, subscribe and stay curious. There is always another one waiting in the vault.